You're tuned to KSJE, Farmington, New Mexico, 90.9 FM. And now 103.3 FM, K277CR, Durango, Colorado.
We have a 911. Armed robbery in progress. See surplus store corner Peoples Drive on 24th Street.
Hi, welcome to Cop Shop. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Farmington Police Department. My name is Nicole Brown, if you haven't tuned in before. It's my official introduction. I don't have the chief with me this week. No chief this week. So I am living it up with my guest co-host today. Can't talk. One of our community service officers, Becky Johnson. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Nicole.
How are you?
I'm good. Trying to wake up still.
Yeah.
Good.
Because you're a swing shifter, huh?
Yeah, I got off this morning at 1-ish.
You made it out. You're amazing. Thanks for coming on. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, Becky, and your career with Farmington Police Department?
So, my name is Becky Johnson. I am originally from Shiprock. I currently live in the Nahanzad, Ozay Tachini Nishle, to Hanabushishi, Nakaidene, Shiche, Red Lake Ojibwe, Shanela. I've been with the Farmington Police Department for 10 years, coming up on November 1st. A little bit about myself. I do a lot of running, and I like to just do some sewing, and I do a lot of extra things outside of my job. I also am a student here at San Juan College. This is actually my final semester, so pretty excited.
Oh, that is exciting. I didn't know it was your final one.
Yeah, I got to ring the bell just the other day about for my turning my graduation application, and I'm just like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to pass my classes yet.
You'll pass.
But I'm ringing the bell.
No, that's exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And finishing up. That's awesome. So, I really am excited about having you on today because we're going to talk about, you are a member of the New Mexico Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force that the governor kind of put together, or she did put together. And what year was that put together?
I was appointed to the position, I think it was the end of September of last year.
Okay.
And then it was for a year-long deal, and then we had our first meeting in October. And so it's been almost a year.
And so what can we talk about, like, what brought about the governor kind of wanting to put a task force together? And what were the goals of the task force?
So the MMIW task force was created because there was like a need for like the shedding of light on the missing and murdered Indigenous women. At the time, the movement was big, and it's getting bigger, and we're actually gaining the publicity, I guess, that we want, because we often, being Native American, always felt like we were the forgotten ones. So when they created the task force, it wasn't just with New Mexico. Several other states kind of started before us, and then we got put in, and then after there were other states that formed task force. Majority of what the task force goals are, or what we were trying to do, is just to try and determine the scope of the problem, identifying where the barriers are, and creating a partnership to improve the processes, for reporting and investigating cases. So one of the bigger things we wanted was to try and do data collecting to find out exactly what the true numbers were, because the statistics that are out there were inaccurate. So one of the main things that we were trying to do is like a data-driven report. But once we started actually meeting and having our sessions, whether they were the work sessions or the open to the public sessions, we were finding that it was going to be a lot harder than we thought in collecting the data, because there just wasn't enough out there. The markers for reporting were not put on the sheets of paperwork when you're reporting it, and DPS actually doesn't collect that data of which, if they're Native American, which tribal affiliation they are. So when we went to try and gather that data, it was pretty skewed because we fall under the category of other and not Native American, let alone saying they're from the Navajo Nation or they're from a Pueblo tribe or, whatever other tribe is out there. And it wasn't just in this area, that you're seeing it. The other task force are also seeing within their states, they have that problem as well.
So the data is inaccurate.
Yeah, the data is inaccurate, and that's one of the bigger things that we want to try and figure out. How can we make it so that the markers are put there, and that way we can try and get more accurate data.
And it's just that hurdle itself is huge.
Yeah.
Changing the way the data is collected is a big deal. There's a lot of processes out there.
Yeah, legislation needs to be changed to make these things happen, because we can't just go to DPS and say, well, change your form and add Native American and the tribe affiliation. There's actually a process that goes through to make that form change, and then to try and do it all across the U.S. and into, the outside of Canada.
Yeah, make it more uniform.
Yeah, and that's one of the goals, is when all of this is said and done and everybody's working together, we're hoping the uniformity of the forms and the data collecting will happen, and we'll eventually get that accurate information.
So as I was just coming on with FPD last June, that this was the missing murdered Indigenous woman was kind of really gaining steam and coming about. And so it was kind of one of the first big national movements as a P.I.O. that I was really aware of and started paying attention to. And part of it was it really made sense to me 13 years as a dispatcher. I have entered a lot of missing people, and you wonder, does this, because we've entered them in Farmington, but maybe their place of residence is somewhere on the reservation, and have they gone home and they just can't contact people, or, so there's a lot of, and I didn't know as a dispatcher how that worked across agencies. And so is that something that the task force is looking at, about how, cross-agency reporting and how they're communicating?
Yeah, that's one of the other, things that we are working on, is trying to get that, I don't know if unity is the right word, but trying to get outside agencies with the tribal agencies to all talk. And when I say outside agencies, that's state, county, city level, and tribal, and federal. Because, if something happens on tribal land and FBI gets involved, they're also involved with it. But if they can all talk with each other and share, that would help the process. And that's what a lot of the barriers are when we have these public, open public meetings. Some families will come forward of the victims, and they will share that, like how they're trying to locate their loved one who may be in a border city, and that border city or border town won't really talk with law enforcement on tribal lands, and just, they take the report and then they just kind of get lost in the shuffle. And when the families are trying to talk to these agencies, they're getting nothing. They're not getting anywhere with it. And it's not just on tribal land. It's, the tribal police, it's also the outer agencies. Just like with my family member, her name is Tiffany Reed. She has actually been missing since 2004. And with me being on shift one night a few years ago, her name came across. Somebody was running her name on data, and I'm like, wait. And then they said the birth date, so I went to go look. But then it came back that she wasn't listed as a missing person. She was just negative, there was nothing. So when I drove there and went to go look to see what it was, that's where it finally hit me, she's not even listed in NCIC as a missing person.
To flag agencies when they contact her.
And so that's where I started to, question, and I called her sister, I called her brothers, and I said, somebody's over here, and I just found out she's not listed in NCIC. So her mom was able to go back to the tribal police department and go to investigations and ask, like, why isn't she in? And we never got an answer. And to this day, I still haven't gotten an answer, other than I think at one point somebody said she was purged, and I'm like, how do you purge a missing person? And that's where it kind of opened my eyes to see where the downfall was with tribal police, and knowing that they didn't really have access to NCIC. Because I'm working for the city thinking they have access to NCIC. I've worked for another tribal community in Arizona as a dispatcher, and they had access to NCIC. So I'm like, why doesn't Navajo Nation have access to it? And it's hard to get them to talk. It's hard for anybody to share anything with us. And here we are a couple years later, and she's still not listed as missing.
Really? She's not in NCIC as a missing person?
She's not listed as in NCIC, but she's like, she was a teenager. She was 16 when she went missing, but she is listed on the missing and exploited children's page and everything.
NCMEC,
there. Yeah, she's listed on there. She's in NamUs, but where I think it really counts is NCIC, because if somebody comes across her in another state, they're not going to know that she's missing.
Yeah, that someone's looking for her, that she may be in a bad situation.
So that's one of the biggest, like, hurdles that I see, just the lack of communication between law enforcement and family members. And that's, a big part of what we're trying to find a solution to, or maybe make recommendations on how we can get people to start talking and get law enforcement more involved in taking this whole issue serious.
And I just, this morning, I was kind of looking at some stats to talk about, and this one kept coming up, and I was amazed by it and can't believe that there's not more of an uproar. But the leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaska Native women between ages 10 and 24 is homicide. It's not a medical condition. It's not, something, and that is heartbreaking to know that, and that we're not, just as a society, doing more, and there's not more outcry for that to be fixed. Because I have daughters, and that scares me, and that breaks my heart to think that's happening.
Right? Like, you look at the statistics, 84% of American Indian and Alaska Native women will face some type of violence in their lifetime. And
that's overwhelming. 84% is overwhelming.
And and to know that those statistics are not 100% accurate makes you wonder, is it even higher? How many more are out there that we don't know about? Whether family tried to report them and they just never got documented, or those that just never got documented. You look at the sexual assault statistics that we have, it's 1 in 2. A few years ago, I think it was 1 in 4, and now it's 1 in 2. So that means if I'm in a room full of my friends, I can count every other person and know that probably we've all been sexually assaulted in our lifetime, whether it was a rape or sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. And it's sad, and I'm a statistic of that. I am a survivor of sexual assault, and that's what kind of got me into advocating. My whole gear was towards, wanting to speak out about sexual assault and wanting to stop the silence of it. And then that led into the suicide part, and now it's brought me into the MMIW part. It's affected my whole family through sexual assault. A lot of my family members, I'm finding out, were victims of it. I have an aunt that was murdered. Her case was gone. It went through the whole judicial system. The offender was convicted. He sat on death row, but now he's been given a life sentence, and that happened here. And then there's my niece who's missing, or my cousin who's missing, and it's like, how many more families are like this. I mean, I have some coworkers who I can talk to, and they tell me, like, I couldn't imagine what you go through, because in my whole family, we've never experienced anything like that. So having these open conversations with people of other races, of other cultures, that's what I want, is that open conversation, so we can talk about the real, tragedies that are happening here.
Absolutely.
And how other people from other ethnicities face the same things or have never experienced it.
Yeah, and no, I agree. And shedding a light on it, like you said, that I love Brene Brown. Do you ever read or listen to Brene? I love her, and she talks about, like, shame. There's a lot of shame kind of correlated with some of that stuff, but it can't survive if you are wholehearted and you're honest and you have open conversations about things. So I think that, and I have so much respect for you and how honest you are about your journey, and I love how you put your whole heart into it. And so I think you are part of the solution, absolutely. And I think it's good to talk about. And so then something big happened on Monday, kind of for this movement. Savannah's Act and is it Not Invisible?
Yeah, the Not Invisible Act.
Not Invisible Act were both passed through the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
On Monday.
So, like, Savannah's Act, that tried to go through, I think, last year, but then it got put down, and then it got reintroduced. And it was really good to hear that it got passed again. Just knowing Savannah's story, you hear it on the radio, on the TV, out on social media. It was really sad to see. I think we just watched her son that was born in a horrific way. They basically took the baby out. Just celebrated, I think, his 3rd birthday. And, that was good to see, but at the same time, it was sad. And
that is sad, yeah. It's
good to have something brought out of that. When you look at what the Savannah Act is, it's just trying to develop and put in guidelines and geared towards law enforcement and trying to help them to, get more training where there is the lack of it. It kind of, that's what's needed.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with Savannah's story, Savannah LaFontaine Graywind, she was a member of the Spirit Lake Nation. She disappeared on August 9th of 2017, and her body was found 8 days later. And like you said, she was pregnant, and her child was cut from her body. But the act directs the U.S. Department of Justice to develop law enforcement and justice guidelines, like you said. And I think that's a big step to try, like the task force is doing, to try and unify and create uniform policies across the nation, instead of kind of this piecemeal that we have all over from state to state, from tribe to tribe, and hopefully makes the data better.
Yeah, when I was looking at the actual act, it shows, providing training to law enforcement agencies on how to record tribal enrollment for victims in federal databases, developing and implementing strategy to notify the public of national missing and unidentified person systems, which is NAMUS, conduct specific outreach to tribes regarding the ability to publicly enter information through the national missing and unidentified person systems or non-law enforcement sensitive portals, develop regionally appropriate guidelines for responses to cases of missing and murdered Native Americans, provide training and technical assistance to tribes and law enforcement agencies for implementation of the developed guidelines, and report statistics on missing and murdered Native Americans. I also saw in that, the FBI shall include gender in its annual statistics on missing and unidentified persons published on its website. Knowing that they weren't including gender, that was new to me.
I didn't know that either. That's interesting.
So when I was reading over the act, I just thought, wow. But when I go back and I look at the FBI's website, it lists the Native American population, I believe, but the numbers are so skewed on it. It's not accurate at all.
And notifying the public is huge too. As P.I.O, I really strive to put as many missing people as I can on our Facebook page because I feel like it's a big tool that we can use. And a lot of the feedback I get is, oh my gosh, there's so many missing people lately. And I kind of want to be like, no, we're just getting better at the way that we report and notify the public. We're really trying to streamline that. Georgette, as she was kind of ending her time with the PD, she was trying to streamline that, and the detectives have been trying to streamline that. And so I want to tell people, no, there's not more missing people. We're just letting you know about it better. And people have been going missing at this rate all along. And it's just not something that we were talking about a lot, and now we're talking about it more.
Yeah. And I like with Farmington PD, I have to say, our cold case detective, Heather Chavez, she does an amazing job with communicating with the outside agencies, whether it's with FBI, with Navajo Nation. I really like that she keeps that openness to Navajo Nation, and she has her ties with certain people, and she works with them well. She helps them just as they help her when it comes to the barriers of her trying to come onto the reservation to get help in locating some of the missing people, versus them also coming to her for help when they come on this side. Mm-hmm. So I really admire that. Not a lot of agencies have that and can say that they have that together, like they have that open communication with outside agencies.
And that open cooperation. Yeah. Heather does do a great job. You're amazing, Heather, if you're listening.
Yeah, you are. The Non-Visible Act that was passed as well, it was aimed at combating the epidemic in Indian country that surrounds murder, the trafficking, and disappearance of Indigenous women. That would coordinate prevention efforts between the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Interior and victim service organizations. So
and that's
the other one.
I thought that was great that they kind of were passed together hand in hand. They address a lot of different things, but things that need to be addressed together. It was a good and it was bipartisan, I think, which was great. It was something that everybody agreed on, which was so wonderful.
And one thing I found was that it is actually the first bill in history to be introduced by 4 enrolled members of federally recognized tribes. The first is Dept Holland, who is from here in New Mexico, and she's Laguna Pueblo, and then there's Tom Cole, who's Chickasaw, and then Sharice Davids, who's Ho-Chunk, and then Marquane Mullen, who is with the Cherokee Nation. So
that's amazing.
That's cool.
So much stuff that's coming about, and I hope that it really helps move the needle on this, and that people aren't victimized, women aren't victimized as often.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you
You're
for having
amazing.
me. That flew by fast.
I know, right? It goes by quickly, but we are at the end. So thank you so much for coming on, and I hope that we can do a follow-up about the progress that's been made.
Yeah,
eventually.
for sure.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us at Cop Shop.
Thank you for having me.